Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we have a standalone special, a very strange film that I think we've been looking forward to talking to for a long time. The one and only Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Now, bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the upcoming Young Captain Nemo series from Fievel and Friends Macmillan Books. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth Studios, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire, live, returned, not on his shield, but carrying it from Fantastic Fest. Welcome back, Tony.
I am back. Hooray! I saw a lot of
Welcome.
movies and want to discuss them eventually on the show. But fear not, true believers. There are a lot of awesome movies headed your way this year.
How
Some of
many
them are on
movies
Netflix right now?
How many movies were you there?
34 or 35 in the theater, and then several others in screeners and such. So I saw about 40 movies plus.
Wow.
It's
Lot of
over the
movies.
course of 8 days, but I had the screeners. Sometimes you can go a little like on either side of the fest. So I would say within 10 days, I saw 40 movies at least.
So it's like a full-time job.
Yeah, it's my staycation. I mean, things are weird. There's a lot of controversy. It's not worth getting into. I mean, it's worth getting into, but actually our friends in Women in Caskets covered the controversy really well on their horror podcast. So I don't really have anything to add to that. But as far as movies go, just sitting in the theater at Fantastic Fest, overall, just super great. Lots of good stuff. Lots of great genre films. And, I have friends I see there like once a year who come in. So that's my main reason for going, is to watch movies with friends and enjoy weird stuff that we may or may not. Some of it may never come to the States. Or get.
I got to say, the Women in Caskets, by the way, that is a great show. I really like how they produce it. I like how just smart you feel listening to them talk, and I know that on occasion they've cited our show, and I was exchanging messages with those guys, and they were saying that they were talking to you at the show.
Yeah.
So I know they're a Tony Salvaggio admirer. So cool. It's one big happy horror movie podcast family.
Yeah. Well, Jen and Don are awesome. I mean, and everybody on the show is awesome. I hung out with them, and Jen I know from working at Rooster Teeth. So
yeah,
she's a really great voice actress and just all around cool person. So I mean, it's always good to give shout outs to cool people doing good stuff and really, forwarding a lot of, it's a good podcast and they have a lot to talk about. And it's really great. Good company.
It is a good show. And their shows have themes, which I think is really neat. Okay. Also in Austin, returned to tell us of his travels, Mr. Drew Edwards, editor-in-chief of HorrorMovies.net, writer for Rockabilly Online, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man, returned from the New York Comic-Con. Gosh, you've been gone for a while too. Welcome back, Drew.
Well, New York Comic Con was just kind of a pit stop. I was more on tour with my wife's band and frequent guest host Jamie with her band Danger Cakes throughout the Northeast. And I swear I drove into a Stephen King novel. I think it was Salem's Lot at one point. It was amazing. It was tiring. It was daunting. But I have returned. No worse for the wear. And I promise you, not as ugly as you probably heard. Inside joke.
That's such a very strange.
Some ill-informed person.
Some of the stories you told were very weird. But that's very, very cool. Okay, I
didn't even tell you about the point where I had to threaten a skinhead in Maine to let go of my tie in the men's room. So,
gosh,
and it worked too. You let go.
How do you get into these situations?
It's the rock and roll lifestyle, baby. It keeps me young.
Yeah. You and Tom Atkins. That's.
I am no Tom Atkins. I can't grow a mustache to save my life.
Yeah, whenever I try to grow facial hair of any kind, I look like a serial killer. It's true. It's very sad. Okay, and somebody who can attest to exactly that. Finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of the Guzman Immigration of Denver. She's also a member of the improv choir In Harmony's Way.
Not a
Say
choir.
hello, Julia.
It's not a choir. It's not a choir. It's just a group. A
Improv,
singing group of
vocal
improv
group.
a cappella singing group. It's very fun. Though I will attest to. Actually, I'll quote one of my best friends who says that Jason looks like a serial killer when he tries to grow a beard. So no, probably not a good idea.
Yep, but welcome back, Julia. Julia, you've actually been here all along. So this is very exciting. I am super excited to have everybody together to talk about this movie right here. Okay, Halloween 3: Season of the Witch is a 1982 American science fiction horror film. American science fiction horror film, so saith Wikipedia, and the third installment in the Halloween film series. This was from an experimental time when the producers thought that maybe what they could do, they had just had two movies about the Shape, Michael Myers, and those were slasher pictures, and they thought we can make this into a big long anthology series, and so this one would be about a different story. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, creators of Halloween, return as producers. It stars Tom Atkins as Dan Chalice, the Doctor, Stacey Nelkin as Ellie, Dan O'Herlihy as Connell Cochran, the bad guy, and the story focuses on an investigation by Atkins and Ellie into the activities of Cochran, the mysterious owner of the Silver Shamrock Novelties Company, in the week approaching Halloween night. So it's a fast moving film. It is not at all what you expect, and we're going to talk about this thing, especially now many years on, to try to figure out, is it well remembered. So I think Julia and I have both started recently. So let's go Tony, Drew, Julia, and I'll go. Opening thoughts. Halloween 3. Tony, if you could start, give us a couple minutes of your opening thoughts on Halloween 3: Season of the Witch.
So I remember my older brothers seeing this and being like, what? This is stupid. It's got masks. It has nothing to do with Michael Myers. Why is this thing even a thing? And I never really saw it because I was like, well, who would want to see that? It sounds awful. But now that I've seen it since that time period, but it's been a long time. So rewatching this, I get why people would be angry, especially considering, like, if you went and saw Nightmare on Elm Street and it was like, here's a new crazy nightmare that happens on another Elm Street with some other, but it's a moped. You're like, what? None of this makes sense. And so with that considered, I get it. However, as an 80s horror movie, this is pretty fun. If you took it as, oh, look, there's this side thing we're going to make. I wish they kind of had made Halloween anthology as kind of a regular recurring thing. That would be really interesting. And then you would see, like, in the next one, you'd see like a Silver Shamrock commercial, and then that would be the nod to that one. And, like in true anthology fashion. I think it's pretty fun. I think it's got a lot of great bits. It's got an awesome Carpenter score. I mean, all the stuff you would want in an 80s horror movie is all there. It's just unfortunately lumped in with Halloween, and it has really nothing to do with the Michael Myers stuff that people wanted.
Right.
And that's sad. But I think it's been maligned because of that. But I still think it's great fun. I mean, if you liked Phantasm, this is kind of in your wheelhouse, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and it is about how, actually, Drew, I'll let you take it. Drew, opening thoughts, Halloween 3, what would you add to that?
Well, I first saw this movie on VHS tape. I did not see it when it originally came out, but I saw it when I kind of started getting into the Halloween sequels. I did initially have kind of the same reaction that Tony's talking about his brother having when I first watched it. I was like, well, I kept expecting it somehow to tie into Michael Myers, and it pissed me off the first time I watched it. But then, like, I remember, like, the days after watching it, like, kind of reflecting on it and coming around to thinking that, like, this is a pretty cool movie. It definitely is an absolutely charming 80s horror film. It's particularly like it's got that very like early 80s-ness to it that like I associate with like The Howling and like American Werewolf in London, where it's like the 80s becoming the 80s. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like shedding off the 70s and starting to become what we think of the 80s being. And of course, what hero of genre films from this time period is fewer more entertaining than Tom Atkins, the man, the myth, the mustache. I mean, you know, he's great. I mean, I will forever associate him most with Night of the Creeps because he has so many quotable lines in that. But this is also great. And honestly, in some ways, as far as like doing a Halloween vibe, I would say this kind of surpasses Halloween and Halloween 2 in some respects because this is about Halloween masks. Like it ties into Halloween in this very literal way. And of course, that commercial for the masks is one of the greatest mind worms in horror.
Yeah.
So this movie's on my regular rotation just about every October. So I really like
That's
this movie.
fabulous. That's really fabulous. Julia, I know that it seems unlikely that you had watched Halloween 3 before this, so I'm curious. You know, when you started to watch it, had I already told you this has nothing to do with the Mike Myers stuff, or what did you think we were getting into?
You may have mentioned it. I am going to have to be the voice of dissent here among what's been said so far and say that I can't stand this movie. I can't stand it. But that should not be a surprise to anyone because I can't stand gory movies in general. So, no, I had not seen it, and I didn't really know what to expect from it, although I think I also would have assumed that there would be Michael Myers, and I didn't know that there was a Halloween movie that didn't have him in it. So I just was like, I started out the film thinking it was really stupid, and then just being really disturbed by how gory it was and how violent, and then being horrified at various points of just some of the choices that the film makes. There's a couple of things that I thought were interesting and unique, but it is definitely not going to be a movie that I will be revisiting anytime soon. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation.
I want to point out that the director here, Tommy Lee Wallace, is a horror director. He was also the director of Fright Night Part 2, and he was the director of It, the miniseries that we reviewed. He, you know, I really like this film. I think it's kind of goofy, but I enjoy how, I don't know, it's a Halloween story. I think I think if it hadn't somehow been branded Halloween, I think if I'm not the first person to say this, but if the movie had come out and it had said John Carpenter's A Halloween Story or something like that, and I get what they were trying to do. They really were hoping that by calling it Halloween 3, somehow they could convey this is part of a series, but it's a new story. And the problem is exactly what Tony said. Tony, I think that was brilliant. This idea that it would be like saying another Nightmare on Elm Street, but this time there's no Freddy, and it's a totally different horror going on. And
I think a comparable thing is the way people react to Wes Craven's New Nightmare compared to the other Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I mean, that's more like a Nightmare on Elm Street movie than this is like a Michael Myers movie, but
true.
You know, it is something very different.
Right. And this is completely different, but it is totally about Halloween. Just like what it has in common, is if you imagine a big anthology, those two movies were about Halloween night. This movie is also about Halloween, and it involves, it is. I think it's a very earnest effort. I also really quick, some things I like. I kind of like Tom Atkins being acceptable as a sexy Hollywood star. I think that's really wild to watch this guy and try to figure out like how exactly he would fit into film today. I'm like, who would you get to play this role, and would they be anything at all like Tom Atkins? And because Tom Atkins is a sort of manly man of a particular time that doesn't quite fit, I think, with the way we would cast this role today. And then
you might use Nick Offerman. Nick Offerman might work, maybe.
Yes, he is like Nick Offerman. Yes, he is. That's a really excellent point. Yeah, he's a wearer of plaid and a mustache wearer, and just kind of a grumpy bruiser. Um, it, it's it's kind of wonderful, and I think Nick is like the only person I could think of who actually fits into this realm today. Um, so we should get started. The I do want to make a note later on of the settings in this, which I think are kind of cool and interesting. But the film starts out with I mean, unlike the previous one, even though the previous films had been shot in California but were intended to take place in Illinois, this is a movie that is shot in California and is intended very much to take place in California. So they have that going for them. Everything is exactly what it's more or less supposed to be. We have a guy who is fleeing somewhere. We don't know where. Um, and he's carrying a jack-o'-lantern mask with him, and he's being chased by an assassin. And the beginning of it, so we open right up with this very sort of decidedly non Halloween action where a guy is being chased by an assassin in a three-piece suit.
Well, that's why I
And
say that from the
yeah,
beginning I thought it was really stupid because he doesn't know how to hide. He's like the stupidest hider ever. He's hiding in wherever the brightest light is. He just kind of crouches down there.
yeah.
So I'm like, dude, like at least go someplace under something that is dark or whatever.
Well,
That was dumb.
I guess I didn't think about that. To me, he appeared like he's so rattled, like
Yeah.
nothing makes sense. Like that didn't bother me because that happens all the time in horror movies. It's not if you start
Yeah.
if you want to leverage that, I would say 90% of horror movies don't work at all. It just straight up it doesn't work. B he's been chased by these guys for so long. In my estimation, because it's been like a few days or whatever, if I remember correctly.
He's exhausted.
Yeah, and so plus these faceless minions or automatons, and he kind of knows that by now, or he's seen this one dude keep chasing him, even though it's several or whatever.
Yeah,
I guess that didn't bother me. I don't know.
In retrospect, yes, I guess that makes sense. But when you see it, you don't know any of that. You just see that he's like running away from a car and just kind of going, I'm gonna stand here in the light, I don't know, but yeah, I guess you're right. When you do see the whole film, it kind of makes more sense.
But this is the first time when we see the thugs, the minions of this, which are these straight-faced guys who stand very strangely, who stand like robots, and it's because this is a spoiler, but it's revealed pretty quickly. They are robots. I mean, they are straight up Terminator-style androids wearing three-piece suits, and they are there enforcing something. So they are out to catch this guy who's carrying this Halloween mask, and the first bit of violence comes when he is attacking the guy who's running away with the mask, and the guy gets squished by a car that rolls and squishes him.
I love the way the guy playing the robot plays it. Like when the car comes at him, he just doesn't it's like, oh, because like you mentioned the Terminator, but I think the primary difference here is like these guys have no personality. They don't even have they don't even really talk very much.
Yeah.
And like the complete lack of regard for his well-being is like you get the feeling that like their programming is just so basic. It's just like, well, here's a car, good night,
Well, and again, that's why when I first started watching it, I thought it was really stupid because I was like, what, dude, stand up or move or crouch down, something to avoid getting smushed by the car. So it's only until later when you figure out that they're just robots, or that it makes more sense that he didn't do that. So I think part of it was that I had immediately was just put off by how silly all of it was. But you're right that now that when you go back and see the film, then it explains a lot of what happened in the first scene.
One of the gentlemen who plays an assassin actually was the guy underneath the Michael Myers mask in the previous film. It's not this one here. This guy here with the brown hair. I can't remember this actor's name, but later on, one of these straight-faced assassin, his name is Dick Warlock, and he actually wore the Michael Myers mask in Halloween 2. These are
That's an awesome
stuntmen,
name, by
gentlemen.
the way.
Yeah, Warlock.
Dick
Yes, it
Warlock.
it is.
Man, it's
Sounds like
good.
he should
Not
be
just
starring
Warlock.
in a bunch of Harry Potter themed pornos.
Yes, I'm.
I see. I was gonna go with like action adventure, like
Yeah.
like he's Indiana Jones meets Doctor Strange. But
That's Richard. That's Richard Warlock. Dick Warlock is a completely different thing, Haas.
Oh man! And then in the 90s, he became Dick Warlock, and we know where his career was then. You got the touch. Bum, bum. Anyway, so yes, so so he gets hurt, and then we move.
Yeah,
on.
he's hurt, and he makes it to. I'm trying to remember. Okay, how does the guy who's on the run wind up in the hospital? I think he's wounded.
He runs into a
and
gas station, and the gas station attendant
He freaks out.
takes him.
Yeah,
takes him to the hospital.
yeah.
And that night, the assassin in the suit comes back. Oi, and this is the first kill. And I have to say, actually,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of blood, but it is a pretty grody kill when the three-piece suit assassin comes back to finish off our guy who has been running, and because the assassin wears these thin leather gloves, and he sneaks into the old man's hospital room and puts out his eyes and basically takes his skull apart. I mean, whoa! I mean, it's rough. It is really rough. Even though there's not a lot of blood, they do this one trick where the camera is from the side, and you see the guy reach in, and now that he's got a hold on the nasal bone, he pulls up just to break the face, which is amazing and crazy.
So
That's
I mean, here's what's weird is I don't like as much like super gross stuff, but it's strange when I was watching this that I thought it was gory, but I didn't think it was as gory as Julia's pointing out. Like it's got a lot of stuff because of the way that the 80s practical effects are. I think maybe like just growing up in that, for me, it was like, ugh, but also like, whoa, that is a crazy prosthetic, you know what I mean? And I think maybe that's it. And I think that's, also why, Julia keeps it real, because I'm like, whoa, look at that gag. And Julia's like, that's horrible. Why would any watch? I think that's good. I think that's a good thing. This is not in no way a knock. But when I finished the movie going, wow, that wasn't as gross as I thought it was going to be. Because I think a lot of slasher movies, like pure slasher movies, are somehow more disturbing because a lot of that violence is more real in a lot of ways, because we do have, violent serial killers and that kind of thing. And so maybe with this, like, it's a crazy mask and it's a, robot assassin, and I see them all as more like gags. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's strange to me.
I know exactly what you mean.
Also, by the way, this is where we, Tom Atkins gets called into the hospital because there's this guy who's had something happen to him, or I guess he goes and meets him. He's like, hey, the gas station attendant's like, hey, am I gonna have to be involved in this? Because this guy freaked out, and so it's where he also sees the first of the assassins as well. And we also get to see his family
straight out,
because he comes home and his ex-wife is having none of his shenanigans. Which at first you're like, wow, she's kind of a jerk, and then you realize he may have cheated on her.
Not just that, but he's clearly an alcoholic. I mean, he's always drinking.
But
he's
I kind of like that. I kind of like the fact that he's essentially a functional alcoholic, because he fits into like a certain kind of film noir tradition. Like he seems like, even though he's a doctor, like he would be this seems like a part Humphrey Bogart could have played. if this had been
This
made in like the
movie
30s or 40s.
Yeah, you said it right, Drew. In a way, this film takes the plot of like a noir detective story. He just happens to be a doctor, but pretty soon into this film, he basically quote unquote takes the case and starts working the case, and that's all he's doing. Only once does he go, "Oh, let me do such and such a thing. I'm a doctor," and even
Yeah.
that doesn't really amount to anything. But yeah,
Right.
just to recap, Tom Atkins comes on the scene here when Mr. Grimbridge, that's his name, is in the hospital bed and is soon assassinated. But Tom Atkins is hard drinking, hard smoking, hits on every woman that he meets.
And
Every
sleeps
woman,
with a lot of
none of
And
them mind.
that's the thing I was going to say is that it's so interesting to see a film from this time period and watch it now when we're just so much more conscious of, like being respectful and like there's certain things you just don't do in movies anymore unless the guy is a bad guy. But this guy's not meant to be a bad guy, but yet he's, touching women on the butt or like just making just whatever, just all kinds of sexually harassing behavior that is not seen as sexual harassment in this film. It's seen as, oh, he's so charming. And it reminded me so much of that John Hamm sketch on Saturday Night Live where it says, how to avoid, being sued for sexual harassment. Rule number 1, be handsome.
Right.
I was like, yeah, that's what this is this guy is just charming, and so that they're going to let it go. But I thought that was funny.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
which is go ahead.
The movie does kind of judge him for his drinking, but you're absolutely right. Like his as far as his sexual content or sexual conduct, I should say, it's completely locked in this 80s sensibility, where it is completely okay to slap a woman on the ass, flirtatiously, and it is completely okay to be like hit on every woman around you mercilessly, and so it is of a time, but I do kind of like this guy is so very flawed, and yet he's the only person in this movie that gives enough of a damn to actually look into this, because I feel like there's a reality to that, because people are layered. Like, and the fact that he is a doctor, means that on some level he does, obviously, even though they doesn't really spend much of a time meditating on him as a doctor, like, it does mean that on some level he does have a degree of empathy for people. So,
and skill. I mean, his brain, in other words, is pretty advanced. I'll be the first to acknowledge those guys are smart. The level of information that they're able to retain is truly incredible. So, in other words, this is a big brain you're seeing walking around underneath this layer of adipose tissue and cigarette haze. There's a large brain. I thought it was interesting also that we see him. Tony, you mentioned his ex-wife, who, by the way, I is an actress who showed up in the original Halloween. She was one of the girlfriends of Laurie. Who
also
got,
go ahead.
Good.
She's also pregnant with the director's baby.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
no kidding.
I feel like
Yeah.
she is the worst actress in this movie, though. Like I at no point.
I guess having Tommy Lee Wallace's baby served her well then.
Well, like, I just at no point believe those kids are actually hers. Like, I don't believe that she ever really had a relationship with. Like, Tom Atkins has this like lived-in vibe to him, so I like absolutely believe all of the stuff that he says, including the stuff when it starts to become like utter bullshit. Whereas like this, like the brief scene to establish that he has kids with an ex-wife is the most preposterous scene in this whole movie to me, because like I just don't believe there was ever a relationship.
They never, by the way, they never say ex-wife. You and I know.
Well, he says my ex.
He says
my ex
really?
at one point.
Yeah, he says ex at one point.
Does he?
I like also even that. I think it's when he's talking to the other, the technician, where he basically like that's the part where I was like, what? Because he's just flirting with her. And it basically turns into this like, my ex, she's kind of a jerk. And she's like, yeah, you're right. But, the thing we had, that was great.
Right.
Like,
So again, it makes
what?
it seem like maybe he was having this affair with this other woman while he was still married to Betty.
Maybe.
I have a
But
feeling he may
I don't
well
know.
have been having a good number of affairs while he was
Yeah.
married.
Well,
That's
come
the
on. I
impression.
mean, Tom Atkins, that
Yeah,
mustache.
it's hard. It's hard to be Tom
Yeah.
Atkins. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the.
It's
mean,
the
you're
early
darn
'80s, and he's got a mustache that would shame Tom Selleck.
Sure.
Oh my. So yes, basically the assassin comes and takes Mr. Grimbridge's face apart, and then Tom Atkins sees it. The assassin goes into the parking lot and sets himself on fire, and so now Tom Atkins is ready to. Well, he's curious what's going to happen, and then the young lady Ellie Grimbridge, the daughter of the man who got assassinated, comes and she wants to investigate, and Tom basically drops everything. He literally just goes, you know what? You're right. Let's get in a car and go check out the last town. Let's go do some detective work. And
Well,
they
it's
immediately started.
not quite as simple. I mean, the guy doesn't set himself on fire. He blows up his own car. Like, he sets himself on fire, but it's pretty weird when somebody's just like, I'm gonna kill a guy, then I'm gonna get in my car and blow it the hell up.
Yeah.
Like, that's weird. And he also starts to see other little bits. Like, and
Yes.
she's pretty convincing when she gives him like the 411 on, hey, this is weird and this is weird and this is weird. I mean, it's weird. It is strange that he decides, like, I'm a doctor, but you know what? What the hell? I'm a detective now.
I'm a detective now.
Like,
I'm fine with it, by the way. I mean, it is strange, but it's strange that Indiana Jones is a professor who actually does all this other stuff. I mean, I'm down with it. It's fine.
Or that Mrs. Fletcher, finds murdered people everywhere
Right.
she goes, and she happens to be a novel writer.
It just is the way it is. This is a detective story with a doctor in the lead, and they very quickly go, well, he bought masks. The last place he went was this little town to buy some masks, so let's head for that town. And listen, I got to admire that the script here moves along very quickly.
yeah.
They're going straight now for the little town where the masks were made to see if maybe he ever showed up. I mean, they don't know exactly what's going on. And the other piece that's being already laid in is that there are in this universe, which is a slightly askew universe from our own, there are in this universe 3 extremely popular Halloween masks that are being supported by what must be the most expensive television advertising campaign of all time, because they are playing this song in a television commercial about these masks.
London Bridges falling down song. It's eight
Yeah.
more days.
Counting down to Halloween.
8 more days till Halloween. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what now? Once you get to the end, though, you realize that while it is an expensive ad campaign, they do have the leeway to throw all of their money at this, because guess what? It's an end game.
Yes.
If you're
Literally.
if you're really like, so this is only going to happen once, like,
Right.
the amount of masks they probably sold, they're like, okay, that's everything. Just put it on the TV because it only has to happen the once. So it makes sense.
This guy clearly has unlimited resources, because not only the advertising, but all the robots that he's built and the technology that goes into these masks is going to cost way more than the masks.
At one point, they do say he is one of the richest men in the country.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he stole how heavy. We should talk for a moment. Oh yeah, that's the other thing that's set up. Somebody out there. So not only are these commercials running that are advertising these masks, and everybody's like, oh, and don't miss the special broadcast 9 p.m. Halloween night. Okay, fine.
Go away.
Of John Carpenter's Halloween, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So,
And by the way, the John Carpenter's Halloween, it's important to note there was a special edition of Halloween that played on television. I don't know the differences between the Halloween TV edition, which had different footage, than the theatrical edition. But this is a thing that used to happen. Like when Superman was on TV, there were different scenes, different footage. I mean, they would literally give you a slightly different version because that was one of the special things that would entice you to go ahead and watch the movie again on TV if you'd already seen
Well,
it in the theater. But I have no idea
Superman
what was
was 2
different.
nights. Superman was like 2 nights. It was like a 3-hour
Right?
event.
Oh no, they blew it out. They added like lots of extra footage into Superman. So this is the same period. Superman came out in 1978, you know, and this is like right around the same time. So that's kind of funny. They're actually going to be playing John Carpenter's Halloween really more or less about the same time that you and I would have been watching John Carpenter's Halloween if it had
On
shown
TV,
up
yeah,
on
yeah.
TV. Yeah. So there's that, and meanwhile, the news says that somebody stole one of the Stonehenge rocks, which is a big deal. I mean, because those things weigh how much did they say? I don't
How the hell
remember.
did they get all the
Something
way to
like
California? I want to know.
5
Tons.
tons.
Well, I love the fact that Cochran is like, they never bothered to explain how they did it, and at one point he's like, "Oh, you'll never believe how we did it.
You wouldn't believe the story.
You won't believe the story." Like, I love him as a bad guy because he's what they call on TV tropes affably evil. Like,
Yes.
he's got such a whimsical nature about himself, and yet he's so awful.
I gotta say, I bet he compares notes with the Tall Man. They
Yeah.
just seem like they should go to a villain like convention. Like, oh, but they have that same kind of demeanor, you know, where I picture them just like, so what do you do? Well, you know, I have these robots. Oh yeah, I thought about that, but instead I, you know, shrink people, compress them on my planet. That's pretty good. But do you have a Stonehenge? Well, no, I've got these like columns. You know, I just pictured them like they're kind of really cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Oh my gosh. I mean, Dan O'Herlihy plays Connell Cochran, who is the owner of the mask factory that our heroes go. So before we meet Connell Cochran, they go to the little town where the factory is, and it is a factory town. And this is a thing that exists in a lot of the literature I read and books I read and radio shows. I have no idea if it exists in real life. The town is built around the factory. As they drive in, everybody's staring at them because of the town. Sure, okay, it could exist, it could not exist. It doesn't matter. In the world of fiction, it is definitely.
I think it's the same thing. I think it's the same thing as oil-filled towns, Jason. I think your middle class upbringing is showing.
Yeah,
no, it may well be.
Absolutely. Yeah, because for sure, I mean, this is you know, there are towns. I've been to one of those towns for in my work that was a paper factory, and you know, the whole town is about the paper factory, and it smells like it too. But you know, this one they drive through and everybody's standing, and it's super creepy actually because everybody's standing in the windows just staring at them as if they were already expecting them to come through. And then the factory is actually a milk factory in real life. I think is what it said. I think it was a milk factory. But yeah, I'm gonna double check that.
So,
anyway, so then they go to the
So the whole thing with people staring, having lived in really rural areas, like really rural, that's actually like when you go in to a town like that and you maybe go to, I don't know, the diner or maybe even like the Dairy Queen, which is still a franchise, but it's still locally run. There's going to be somebody who's going, hey, so you're not from around here. I heard, you know, I heard you driving in or whatever, or so-and-so, you know, Lola said you drove in the morning. Like, that's the kind of stuff that's like, it's creepy and weird in this because they amp it, but it's really super real. And that's like, it's, I mean, the thing about the factory town too, though, is the reason we have modern ghost towns is because when one of those factories closes, and I've been around several of those towns where like there was a, you know, textile mill or any number of things like that. It's devastating. That's why you have these, you know, basically modern ghost towns where you know tons of storefronts that aren't, you know, they're boarded up or they're just kind of there, just, you know, everything in the windows is collecting dust. It's really, I mean, heck, Hearn, Texas was the a Walmart came and left, and that was devastating enough.
Yeah.
Much less if every bit of why that town exists closed down. So yeah, it's a real thing, and it really, like, when they were coming in, I was like, oh yeah, that's how that is. It's pretty spot on. Like I said, it's amped for
Sure.
drama, but it's not very far off from the reality of a small, factory town, dairy town, coal town, whichever, oil town, whichever one you want to name. It's all very similar industry.
Jason was in love with the motel that they end up at, and
Yes.
it's so cute. And
yeah,
and the family,
they wind up at a motel. It is this little motel that I think is beautifully painted. It doesn't have very many rooms. It's a proper motel because you enter each room from the outside. You park in front of the rooms, but it seems like a historic motel. Go ahead, Julia. What were you going to say about it?
I was just going to say the family that pulls up in the RV. Marge. Well, no, is that the one that Marge Gutman? No, Marge Gutman's the one that she's there by herself, right? It's not the family. Is Marge Gutman?
Yeah, Marge Gutman
herself?
is the one that's by herself. Yes.
Yeah, she's by herself. Okay, that woman who ends up getting horrifically dying from well, we'll talk about it in a second. Anyway, she's married to Tom Atkins at the time, which I thought was really funny.
She's the one who's married to Tom Atkins. I see.
Yeah, she's the one, Marge Gutman. So yes, but first they have to get the family that's in the RV, and then you've got Marge, and all of these people presumably are there to go pick up masks from the factory, and they all have had mixed reviews of how that's gone or how it's going. But yeah, so she will eventually say that the masks aren't that great because the logo falls off, and the logo has a chip on the back of it, which is what the master plan is all along, is to have this chip be activated by these commercials. And so when she finds it, because it's fallen off the mask, she finds it, picks it up, and starts messing with it with her bobby pin. She gets zapped by it, which they call a misfire, and it's like this. Again, it's what Tony was saying of like what I'm sure the special effects guy was very proud of for his prosthetic, but to me was just horrific that her face gets like completely destroyed and deformed by this beam.
Oh man, I love that stuff. I feel like I kind of echo what Tony was saying earlier though, when I see stuff like this, like, and the way her death looks, it is grisly, but like because I know it's not real and I'm fascinated by special effects, like I look at it more like a magic trick. I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. How did they do that? And when I used to read monster magazines when I was a kid, and they would always have like the interviews with the makeup effects artists. It's stuff like this that made makeup effects artists from this time period like the rock stars of the horror genre.
Yeah.
I mean, it is gruesome. I mean, it magic lasers her face apart, like,
and it blows her face up in a
snake. Snakes and bugs come out of it.
And those bugs, those weird spider ant bugs, whatever they are grody, man.
The bug thing has to just be straight up witchcraft magic, because there's no way the bugs are coming from any place.
Right. No,
there is a piece of Stonehenge in the chip.
It's Stonehenge magic. So this thing has zapped her. This is what is so crazy, like evil Ray Bradbury nonsense wonderfulness, because it is Stonehenge magic and high-tech programming put together to create a microchip that will basically kill you and give you a sort of satanic whammy that will make bugs and snakes come out of your head. That's awesome. I mean, who doesn't?
That makes Cochran the true Dick Warlock in this.
Yes.
Literally,
no, it's
in this case
fabulous. That is just so brilliant, and I'm glad also that there's not that much explanation. I've been reading a lot recently where people will say, "Hey, I did this in this script, or I updated this or this thing," and the studio is always telling me, "Oh, well, be sure and put in some dialogue explaining why such and such a thing happens." And here, nobody's going to say, wow, how is it able to make their head collapse and bugs come out? It just go with it, man. It's
Well, they're almost thumbing their nose at that.
Right.
Because like I said, like he's all like, "Oh, you'll never believe how we got that piece of Stonehenge here." Like they know people are gonna ask. They just don't care. They're not interested in that. They're trying to tell you this crazy yarn about killer Halloween masks.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
no,
like that.
absolutely. In fact, just to explain what happens next, basically, our heroes, continue their investigation. They it becomes clear that basically the factory has been moving as many masks as it can, and are handing these masks over to the retailers. They're selling out because of all the advertising. So everybody here is basically here to try to pick up new orders. And as Tom Atkins and Ellie continue to investigate, they do get a tour. Um, and I kind of want to skip ahead to the demonstration because yeah,
First we start to see the more of the nefarious stuff because the woman's clearly dead and they take her. He's like, "Oh, I'm a doctor. I can help look at her." Like, no. We have this factory. We have the best hospital ever. Like, do you know how rich I am?
At the factory.
Like at the factory, everybody here is super rich. This is the best. We're gonna take care of this. By the way, it's not only an investigation, but Ellie and Daniel, Tom Atkins' character, have decided. I mean, she's brought lingerie along with her, so they're having a good time when they're not investigating the case.
Yes, right. They've started.
Yeah, she seems to have gotten over her dad's death pretty quick there, because now that there's the sex.
Well, she's not over it, but in the meantime,
she's finding
there is a crazy mustache.
She's finding comfort in the arms of manly man Tom Atkins. Is how this is. I mean, who would not?
I will say, as far as it's always in movies like this, and Rain points it out a lot too. I don't know if most people's reaction, I could be totally wrong, is, oh, there's a big traumatic thing that's happened, let's get it on.
Yeah.
But one thing that is there is, unlike a lot of horror movies where it's just, hey, it's the teens and they're crazy. These are consenting adults who are, the way it all plays out is fairly believable. If I thought that was really interesting. Just, hey, we're hanging out together. This is not. There's no like.
Yeah, no,
wrong or whatever. He tries to be a gentleman. He tries to be a gentleman.
This is a totally appropriate relationship. Yeah, this is not.
When and as lecherous as he is, he does not force himself on her like out of a Sean Connery James Bond movie. Like he offers to stay in the car, and she's actually the one that insinuates coming on to him a little stronger.
Right.
So that is interesting. As much as he is a character of his time, he does have a leg up on some other characters from movies from the same time period.
I mean, I should point out on Blade Runner this same time, Rachel has her big emotional breakdown, and Harrison Ford basically rapes her. I mean, he like grabs her and he slams her against the wall and he forces her to kiss him and demands that she say things and stuff. It's a much more aggressive scene, and you can interpret it different ways. I mean, it might not be fair of me to say that it's
but it was fine. But we should move into the because we still have a lot of movie to cover.
Yeah. Well, let's skip to.
Did you guys notice that that we have Jamie Lee Curtis's voice all throughout the film? Like she's the voice that tells everybody that it's curfew time, and she's the voice of the operator whenever Tom Atkins gets around to trying to call for help at various points. I just wanted to mention that because I thought that was really cool.
I will say that it's not cell phones and super villainy and stuff like that. But maybe he's just never had to deal with this. But I would have hoped that he would have figured out that a small town, even if he sneaks, there is nothing about a phone network in a small town that isn't monitored, or there's stuff, party lines, all this stuff. Like, I guess living where he lived, he just hasn't thought about that. Yeah. Because where I lived in Mississippi, you couldn't even you might in the late 80s pulse dialing, but there was, regular dial phones. That was the thing for way longer than it should have been, So when I
When I
visit my
first
family
got
in
my
Texas,
phone,
it was like,
this is gonna age me, and I know that that Drew gets annoyed when I say this, but I'm like, but I do feel like I'm at least a few years older than you are. And when I got my phone set up in college, they actually gave me the option of having a party line for my phone, which is a line that is shared with other people. So theoretically, I would have picked up the phone, and somebody else would be having a conversation, and I could either choose to listen to it or hang up and try later.
right.
And I was like. And I think about that now, and I'm like, God, that feels like an old-timey thing. But it was a thing that they gave me. Now, I didn't have to. It wasn't the only choice I had, but it was a cheaper choice for if I wanted to set up my phone that way, which I think is really interesting now, given how far we've come.
Yeah. But this small town, I laughed because he's like sneaking around and trying to call, and then the operator, everything he tries to dial out. When he sees that this stuff is going on, that's the point where he's a doctor, not a detective, because he keeps doing these things and thinking he's stealthy when he's totally not. But anyway, they go to the factory, and they also meet the family who is there because not only are they picking up masks, but they're the top sellers.
Oh, right, that's it.
Yeah. So it becomes this almost Willy Wonka like.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
totally.
With their child Augustus Gloop.
And so what they win for being the best sellers is that they get to be the test case for the horrific murder scene.
Yeah, because he's a dick warlock.
Yeah.
Dick warlock. Yeah, so they go. He's gonna do this demonstration of what happens when the commercial plays and you're wearing the mask. So they get locked into this room. And the lock for the code for the lock is 666, and they lock them into this room. Start playing the commercial, and that's when you see what Jason was referring to before, which is the kid puts on the mask, and when the final commercial plays, his head sort of implodes and turns into bugs and snakes. I mean, it's just. Oh my God! Like this is what I'm saying. I can't get on board with a movie like this because they're not only doing this horrible thing, but they're doing it to the children and presumably.
Yeah, but
I'm going to fast forward to the end here and say presumably they do it to all the children. Now we don't see it because it cuts off.
No. Well, no, I mean like they save at least some of the kids, but like
they do it to a third of the children.
This family, by the law of 80s horror, has to die because they are dysfunctional and obnoxious, and the kid is a brat. And in real life, yes, that's not enough to deserve to die. But in the rules of 80s horror, this family has to go. Like they are jerks.
Yeah.
They're tacky. The kid is a brat, and like they are not likable people.
Also,
like at best, they're meant to be funny, but they're funny because they're tacky and trashy.
They're totally tacky. Now, isn't that funny? Okay,
and
you
that
were just
death
talking
scene,
about...
and I gotta say, is Julia's right. That's horrific, but that kid's death scene is awesome. The way that mask actually ends up looking like a real rotten pumpkin.
Yeah,
that was one of the that is one of the things I always thought was one of the coolest things about this movie when I was a kid, was the way that particular death scene looked. And it's horrific. It's a kid. They go there. But it is important to note, no one is actually hurt because it's a movie.
Well, also, I like Cochran's, like, when he's watching it. And, tons of bugs come out and snakes come out, and then people are getting bit by vipers and rattlesnakes. And he's kind of like, yes, this is exactly, weird.
Right.
This is exactly what we wanted. I can't imagine this working better than summoning snakes and terrible bugs and having to kill. These families it's going to wreak havoc. This is the best.
And he's so excited. He gives a great speech. He gives a villain speech where he even slips into a slight Irish, what he called a Cork accent, where he slips into this slight Irish brogue whenever he's talking about the olden times of Samhain and the sacrifices and yada yada. Good stuff. I mean, because by the time he shows that demonstration, he has Atkins under control. He has Ellie captured separately, and he's like, "This is the plan. I'm just letting you know. We're going to kill all the kids that we've managed to sell masks to who are going to tune in, which will, in theory, be most of them. A very, very high number, I guess,
Well,
of kids.
because at this point he's also super villain. Like he shows you like, hey, look
Yes.
over there. Stonehenge, right? Look at what we got, and he's just showing us this is how it is. I mean, you're gonna die. I'm gonna kill you.
Yes.
And I love his whole thing of, and we don't decide these things, the planets do.
Oh yeah.
Like even though his plan is actually senseless, because I mean, I guess, yeah, okay, if you look at this as human sacrifice, maybe there's a black magic reasoning behind it, but we never really learn what that is. So his plan fundamentally is senseless because he spent all this money to kill all these people, but it doesn't really seem like there's any gain out of it. I mean, like I said, if there is some kind of gain, we don't know.
It's the same gain as any. It's the same gain as any Lovecraft cult lead. Like you summon these otherworldly things because that's what you do, because you're in service of these things. His whole deal is whatever terrible havoc. I mean, by the end of it, we get the impression that we might even, whoever's left might experience like mouth of madness kind of crap. That his whole deal is, and he says like, oh, we don't decide this, the planets do, because this is the perfect time. He is the person to bring this about for whatever reason, whether he runs a international cult or however it is.
At the same time, I love it when Tom Atkins gets the upper hand. Like he dies amused. Like he actually claps his hand. Okay, you got me. Like he.
So to play that out.
Good one.
So to play that out, Tom Atkins finds a bunch of the chips, tosses them over, and basically kills everybody who is either human or robot. Magic lasered by these chips, because he also turns on the Shamrock music.
Right. So the triggering commercial plays. He plays somehow pressing, like you say, magic fingers, pressing magic buttons. He manages to trigger the final commercial to play there where they are, and that activates all the chips, and then he dumps all the chips, and the activation of the chips, rather than turning the robots, or for that matter, the bad guy, into snakes and bugs, it just makes everybody explode and everything, which, whatever. I don't understand it. But I want to understand something, and this is something that really bothers me. Is what is the point that he is making? What is he trying to accomplish with this sacrificing to the gods? What's Cochrane trying to accomplish by sacrificing all these children to Samhain, to the gods? Like, what is he? That's what bothered me, is that there's not a real good plan here. Like, usually the main bad guy has the plan of taking over the world or getting whatever.
He's totally in service of the god. He's not. He doesn't want power. He wants to make a grand gesture for the dark forces.
One imagines that the dark forces, with all of these sacrifices, will run the world.
Yeah, maybe they might do something cool.
What he's expecting is the whole better to serve in hell than be on your knees in heaven. That's exactly like any cult leader of an evil cult. His whole purpose is to bring about something greater than him. Like I said, in if you'd continued it, you could picture it. I almost picture, like, if it's successful, being at the mouth of madness, or any number of things, any Lovecraftian mythos where at the end, it's not going to be good for humanity, but because you're a head of a cult of to them, they're not evil either, right? Like, they do evil, but that's in service of exactly what they wanted to do. So for him, this brings about an event. I mean, he had hoped to live and rule, probably, but Tom Atkins cuts that down. It's bringing about this thing, this apocalypse of sorts, or
but they never
maybe
outright spell that out.
Of course not, but I mean, they don't have to.
I think it's better. What I'm trying to say is, I think it's better that this movie does have a lot of ambiguity about what this group of witches is really up to. Which is how it would honestly actually, like, if you're Tom Atkins and you've stumbled onto this conspiracy, you're probably not going to get the James Bond villain speech where they go, and this is why we're doing this. Like you're not going to get that, because is there is kind of a weird level of reality to this where like you never do get the whole picture. And that's, even though John Carpenter didn't personally direct this, I feel like that is like a very John Carpenter flourish, is like he always talks about that, like, you know, a lot of the times he likes to leave his movies open-ended. He likes to leave certain details out about what's going on because he thinks that's the way the real world operates. And so like the John Carpenter touches are, you know, all over this movie, even though he wasn't, you know, the actual director. He was just a producer and everything, but like it's still very much got that John Carpenter sensibility to it.
Yeah, I mean, you could triple feature this with this, The Stuff, and Prince of Darkness, and it would all sort of fit together. And in The Mouth of Madness, if you want to make it a marathon, like all of it would fit together.
The Mouth of Madness, by the way.
So I think you're right. Like I could see all of those fitting together similarly. With 3 of them though would have, like, The Stuff is pretty much like a corporate capitalist thing, but it is similar.
I mean, to me, I think he does explain it pretty well. I was not bothered for a moment by his explanation, which was once upon a time everybody was good and afraid of the demonic forces. That hasn't really seen better days recently, but we're going to bring it all back. I'm not confused. I get it. Yeah,
and to his point, he's taken, you know, for him, he looks at Halloween now and he's like, ugh, you know, costumes, masks, etc. He's like, okay.
It's like,
what if we take this?
It's like the Christmas Charlie Brown, where he's like, everything's just so commercial.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's going to take that and go, well, I see that you've done this to our, you know, what's a reality to us. So we're going to take that and turn it back on you, as a very poetic thing. And that's how his grand scheme of things, like when he dies, it's what Drew says, he understands it in the cosmic, circle of life. I did not expect to lose, but that was really well played. This must be how this is supposed to play out. And class,
I agree with you about that.
It's so great.
Yes, yeah.
I like, he refers to his scheme as a practical joke on the kids. And that does always give me a little bit of goosebumps on the back of my neck, because I think about myself as a kid in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And I think about like how they had these great Don Post masks as the masks in the movie. And if this was like a promotion that was going on when I was a kid, I was loving Halloween the way I did, I absolutely would have been like, ooh, Magic Pumpkin at the end of the horror-thon, and I wear my mask, and, you know, it's going to play the special music. Like, my head would have gotten melted. Like, I would have been one of the kids with the melty head.
Oh, hell yeah. Like, I would have begged my parents and my grandparents, if my parents couldn't afford it. I really have to have this mask. This has got to be. Everyone has it. I've got to get this mask.
I don't think Jason. I think Jason would have been spared, because Jason abhors anything popular.
That's not true.
He's always like, anything that other people like, I don't like it.
That's not true.
Well, I didn't realize Jason was the original hipster.
Jeez.
No, well, I don't know if he'd call himself that. But I remember, seriously, because I met him in 10th grade, and I remember him going, I used to love Batman, but then Batman came out, and everybody loves Batman now, so forget it.
That story is not true.
No,
I liked Batman before Batman was cool.
You know how I know that story's not true?
It is
because
true.
Batman came out in the summer of 1989, and we were in the 10th grade.
Then maybe that's when you said it. But I already knew you. Is my point. But yes, that's probably when you said it was then. And I just remember you being like, I don't like Batman anymore now because everybody else likes Batman.
I'm sure that is not a fair summation of what I said.
So I find that hilarious. Good Julia, be right, and I don't have any reason exactly. I mean, I know both of you, so I'm sure it sits somewhere in the middle. But the man who shot the Chess King cannot be an iconoclast in that respect, in my opinion. But Well, I'm gonna say that it sits firmly in the middle. I'm guessing that it was probably these people don't even know Batman. But it would be an very 89. All these like carpetbaggers who were coming in and harshing on my Batman. I bet they don't even know he was the Red Mask.
Yep. Well, anyway, so maybe all of you would have died, maybe just a couple of you. Who knows? I know for sure that I never owned any kind of scary mask, but that's because I didn't want one. So I probably would have been spared from that. But anyway, so it's a horrible, horrible thing. The poor little Ellie, or is that her name, Ellie?
Yeah.
Ellie has gotten abducted by these people and is presumably in this one of the rooms. And so whenever they have set up our James Bond with his, they've told our James Bond the master plan of what they're going to do, and then left him in a room to die by himself. And manages to escape, and he throws the mask that they've put on him up over the security camera so that it won't see him. And by the way, that shot took 40 takes before they could get it on to put the mask on the camera.
I can see that.
Yeah. But so then he manages to break out, and he's going to go rescue Ellie from the room that he has been shown that she's in. And he grabs her, and then they pull off the whole thing we were talking about with the chips and all that, and blowing up the place. But they still have to go. Rescue the rest of the world because the masks are out there and the commercials are out there, and so now and the 9 o'clock hour is coming soon. So they still got to get out there. It's not like a lot of movies where it's broadcasting from the place that they're at. No, this is going to be from the stations.
No, but that's how you do it. What? I mean, that's how what you do. You send tapes out to the affiliates. They've paid to have that, and that's what I'm saying. That's awesome.
Right, that makes sense. That actually is realistic because in a lot of movies you just have to go to the one place, and then if you can get that satellite down, you're good. But this one, he's actually got to talk to the affiliates, which of course wasn't really that realistic how it went because he just makes one phone call and presumably the whole world is going to be able to be, the commercials for the whole world are going to be able to shut down by this one commercial. But anyway, so he is in the car with Ellie, and Ellie's not Ellie. She's a freaking robot, and she attacks him, and it's terrifying. And that means Ellie's probably dead, which is also terrifying and horrible.
Yeah.
Everything is horrible to me about this film. Like, all the things are scary, but also gross. Like, actually, the thing with her is pretty good because that's a real shock. It's a real twist. And all the stuff where her robot arm still tries to kill him even when it's severed from her body.
You are aware that you are watching a horror film, and by pointing out the fact that all this stuff is horrible, that this movie in fact did its intended job.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it didn't.
Horrify you.
Unlike many of the films we review, this one I'm not going to say is not necessarily a horror movie. It's definitely a horror movie.
Yeah, I mean, he has to wreck to save himself, and the stuff he has to kill her, and despite his like super macho 80s, virility thing, he's broken up. He thinks they're safe, and he actually seems to have a thing for her. And it's really terrible. All of the stuff that he has to, she tries to kill him. Oh, and we've also seen, the agents are everywhere, so they kill his maybe girlfriend, or at least, person he flirts with, who's the lab technician. She gets
they kill her because she keeps they keep having conversations where she is sifting through the ashes from the car explosion and saying, there's just car parts here. There's no... we can't find any human remains.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And all of this, going back to the kind of satanic panic thing, when all of that was active, what a lot of things glossed over and what they began to find out is the people who were in actual cults, like not I love Ozzy Osbourne and Judas Priest and Satan, throwing up the horns, were like most things, doctors, lawyers, important people who could really shift things and make things happen and cover up things, etc. They were often pillars of the community. This is, as they started doing interviews and stuff like that, but nobody really wanted to hear that because they wanted to hear about how, heavy metal was bad and blah, blah, blah. But the actual people who would go to a, satanic church or whatever. And I realize it's not the same, as Satan, satanic panic, but all the pillars of the community were the people who really ran a lot of the things and had
and like the KKK also.
Yeah, exactly. And so that kind of bears out with this particular cult, where there's people in power who have a very vested interest. There's probably, again, they don't show up, but there's some senators, there's a bunch of judges, et cetera, who are making sure that this Silver Shamrock plan goes about. The head of at least one of the affiliates, I'm sure, like, hey man, Cochran, when are you gonna give me the tape? Like, I know what's going on. Oh yeah, we'll give you that. You'll wanna be watching the cameras when this happens. Oh, great. Right. I'm sure that a similar conversation has happened at some point. But yeah, so he gets back and realizes, oh no. And it's also great because it's realistic and the kids are not going to stay up. Usually you would do this at midnight because midnight on Halloween sounds really cool.
Yeah.
But he goes like, we're going to show this at 9. And that's the time where you would show this. Kids are back from trick-or-treating.
Right.
It's
exactly.
Going to be scary.
Yes.
They can go to bed. Oh, we'll let you stay up a little bit later while you eat your candy. And it all makes sense in the suburban landscape of the time. And, it's horrifying because he's trying to stop. And just when you think it's stopped, like there's one affiliate who's the holdout he couldn't reach. And we don't know what's going to happen, but it's not going to be good. There's going to be lots of melted kids regardless.
Yeah, we seem to think that it's that we're gonna wind up, and I like that. So he manages to. It's just like if at the end of Moonraker, James Bond has to destroy 3 bombs that are hurtling towards the Earth, and he destroys all 3. This would be like if James Bond had managed to destroy 2 of the 3. So one of them is gonna blow up a section of the United States, and here, yeah, the kids, a certain fraction of the kids have these masks. A certain fraction of the kids are going to be able to be in front of their TV at the right time, and a third of that fraction are going to be watching the deadliest channel.
However, it's probably more than a third because it seems to be on all the stations, at least locally. I don't know how they broadcast it.
But they end it in an ambiguous way. That's also that John Carpenter thing. Like, they may or may not.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. They end it in an ambiguous way in the version we saw, but they actually they actually have an ending where over the credits they play all the children screaming. So
what?
It is intended that they all die. It's just that they decided not include that so that it could be ambiguous.
And I thought this was
again, though, I think that is the John Carpenter influence, where you don't really know,
right.
And the ambiguity. Did he save the kids or did he not? He is a father. His kids have the mask.
Yeah, stupid ex-wife wouldn't listen to him when he told her not to let them wear them.
In her defense, she's married to this character who is he's doing it for the right reasons, but he's still, even in this movie, he's kind of a bad dad.
Yeah,
in the way that you would expect dads to be. We know, the viewer knows that he's really out to help the world, but to his ex, oh look, you've missed another,
right.
event.
Yeah.
Great. I guess is the child support going to come through this month? That kind of thing. So to her, this is a long string of what may or may not be infidelity. Definitely his drunkenness. Definitely he's missed things where, we can assume that at least once he said he was going to surgery and has to call her from a bar.
Right.
By the way, her name is Nancy Keys. I was searching for a name earlier. It's Nancy Keys. She played Annie in the original
Helen. Nancy Loomis.
Oh, no kidding. Nancy Loomis. Yeah. All right.
Wow.
It is Keys. This one. Yeah.
Cool. Yes. So that's the end of Halloween 3. We should go ahead and get our final thoughts and then go into endorsements. But this was a heck of a fun movie to discuss. That's my first final thought. But Tony, you kicked us off. Final thoughts. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. And here's my real question. Somebody comes to you and they go, it's Halloween. Listen, I've never watched this because people have always told me this or that or the other. Do you think they should watch Halloween 3?
I mean, it not at the detriment. Like, if you want to see the true definitive Halloween, like Halloween 1 and then maybe 2, if you want to, I would say, do you like 80s, horror movies? Like, do you like crazy prosthetic? Like, are you enraptured with 80s horror? If so, this is a great version of that with, it's dark. It's darker than it should be. Do you, I would probably ask him, have you seen the stuff? Have you seen Prince of Darkness, if you've seen The Mouth of Madness, that's in their wheelhouse. And yeah, if you want to see a slasher film, avoid this like the plague. This is not that by any stretch. But, if you're going to see this, you could also, if you wanted to intersperse, you could throw some Full Moon Entertainment stuff around this. It would fit right in with that. It's got a great, the score is awesome. Everything you'd want it to be. This, I guess, is going into my final thoughts. I didn't see it for a long time because so many people were very outraged this was called Halloween. And I get it. It's not what you would want when you went to go see a Halloween movie. As a 80s horror, it's pretty cool. I dug it a lot. It's got nefarious, affable villains and cute 80s, paramours and crazy, an amazing mustache.
Yeah.
And flawed characters in trying to stop evil. I don't know. That works for me.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Drew, final thoughts, Halloween 3.
You asked the question of whether this movie is well regarded and well remembered at this point.
I actually think that it's not very well regarded. My question was, should they watch it? Given somebody's liable to come to you and go.
I have an expansion on that, though.
All right.
Because you asked that question before we actually started recording, but you did ask that question.
Okay, go, man. Yeah.
And this movie does have a following now. This has developed a following independent of the Halloween franchise to the point where they are now producing the masks from this movie to sell. You can go to a Spirit Halloween store somewhere and buy these masks because this movie has enough of a cult following now. So, this movie has come around to where that it is well remembered by at least enough people to where it's got merchandise. But that being said, there are a lot of people that just hate this movie because it doesn't have Michael Myers in it. And I gotta throw on with Tony. I get that, but if you can get over yourself for a second, this is a fun Halloween themed horror film. If your problem with this movie is that it doesn't have Michael Myers in it, you're not liking this movie because it's not what you want it to be, not because of the actual like Julia doesn't like this movie because of the content of the movie. She actually does not like this movie. But if you are already a horror fan and you like horror movies from this time period, this is a great Halloween themed horror film in my opinion. And I really like it. I watch it just about every year around this time period. I think it's a good capper. Not a good capper, but it's a good way to kick off the Halloween season. And I just think it's a lot of fun. I'm really glad that we finally got around to doing this one because it's one that we've kicked around a lot. I think just about every October since we did a bunch of the Michael Myers Halloween movies a few years ago, and I think pretty much every October since then. At one point, we've discussed doing Halloween 3, so I'm glad we finally got around to doing it.
I think it's telling that the reason Julia dislikes this movie is probably why dyed-in-the-wool horror fans should like this movie.
Right.
This is not meant as a judgment of either way, but I think that it is very disturbing. It's very bleak. It has all of these tropes that especially if you grew up and these were the things that you rented, this is why you should see it. And that's fascinating to me.
Well, it's got that great mixture of whimsy and cynicism that I think 80s horror really specializes in. I think when I think of horror films and the tone of horror films from this time period, that's I think the way that I would describe them is they're both whimsical and cynical at the same time, and this is a perfect example of that.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I will grant that yes, if you can get past the fact that it's called Halloween 3 and just pretend it's called something completely different, so we're not worried about the Michael Myers thing, because that's annoying, but it's not the main thing about the film. Then you're just dealing with, do you like movies with gory special effects and slashers and children whose heads implode and turn into bugs. If so, then you will like this movie. I do not like that kind of film, and so therefore I don't like this one. But that being said, I think the acting is fine. I think the effects are fairly realistic when they're meant to be, and when they're not, they're almost funny, really. And there's some scary moments, a couple of jump scares, but it's just not my kind of film. It's not that I think this one is worse than other ones like it. I just don't like this kind of film.
That's completely fair, by the way.
Yeah.
I totally understand that.
No, but I think it's well said. You felt like it was a more or less effective movie, right? Though that you thought it was scary or
right. Yeah, no, I think there's some scary moments. I think it's more. I would say it's more gross than scary, really. But there are definitely some scary moments. Like I said, the moment when you realize Ellie is a robot is really scary to me.
Sure.
So there was some things like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. And for me, I really loved the creepy town mystery that this was. I can get the curious business of how impossible it turned out to be to separate the Halloween brand from the Michael Myers brand. That by the end of 2 movies, those were so inextricably linked that for Carpenter to turn around and say, okay, for number 3, it's the same brand but a new product, and that was a non-starter. It was just simply completely rejected from the beginning. That's fascinating to me. As a movie itself, if somehow they had been able to pull that off, I like the spooky town story this is, and I'm interested in whatever was going to come next. So this works for me. I enjoyed this one a lot. All right, so I'd love to do endorsements and hear about what you guys are talking about. We'll start with Tony. I know that you've been at the show, so you might want to endorse something that you watched, but it might be something completely different. So Tony, what are your endorsements this week?
So it's tough because, again, that's 34 films, and I'm sure I'm going to be endorsing more stuff and talking about more stuff. The 2 that I saw that immediately leaped to mind are Gerald's Game, since we've been, and I'm tying this back in because we just did a Stephen King retrospective, which is my Fantastic Fest. Again, Working Press was like, oh, here's the things we just covered. So I was really thankful that they showed that in 1922, which should be on Netflix very soon, I think this week, and are really good adaptations. The directors are really cool. We hope maybe we'll get to talk to them. I think we're seeing a lot of really cool King adaptations. Also, what was neat was most people are going to see Gerald's Game in 1922 on a small screen, or relatively small. We have large screen TVs, but not in a theater. And so it was really cool to see these Netflix movies. I kind of wish, I know Netflix has gone on record as oh, we're cooler than theater. We're doing this. I now wish they would kind of go back and have a Netflix Selects where they release it, but hey, you can go see it in the theater on the big screen, because I think there's a lot there to take in. And it was really awesome to see the directors watching it with an audience, which is not something you usually get on a Netflix movie. So if you know Gerald's Game, and I'm not going to say anything, there's a couple of moments where seeing those moments with an audience was pretty awesome. And just the wave of reaction was really what you want when you see a horror movie or a genre film in a theater with a bunch of people.
Right. Where everybody gets affected by the same terrible thought at once.
So I kind of, it did make me wish that there was this kind of, like I said, Netflix Selects where some of it went back to the theater. I think that would be great, especially since they're doing so much, programming, original programming. So that would be really cool.
Well, I mean, Amazon does that, by the way. With a lot of Amazon's direct-to-streaming stuff, they actually do have a pit stop in the theaters sometimes. And that's one of those things that they use to market their deal to producers. It's like, well, you can consider Netflix, you can consider Amazon. The money might be better with Netflix, but Amazon will also do, at least if we believe in the product, will do a limited theatrical release. And
and in that, again, there's so many movies. Anna and the Apocalypse, which is a zombie. It's High School Musical meets zombies. From Scotland. That was
That's awesome.
pretty awesome. Again, great. A lot of the filmmakers were there. Great music. It feels very High School Musical, which isn't always kind of my wheelhouse, but it was done really well. Another film tying back to our Hitchcock retrospective, 78/52, which is a documentary that basically deconstructs the shower scene. It takes the shower scene as its prime focus and goes into nuance. It seems like it would be very kind of navel gazing, and how can you do a movie just based on that? However, it was really compelling, especially if you're a film nerd, and that was really cool. I enjoyed that. It's another one of those where you're in the festival and somebody says, "Hey, this is really cool," and it's somebody you trust, and so you move a movie around because you trust their insight, and then end up going, "Yeah, oh man, you were so right. I'm so glad I swapped, this movie for that movie, and I'll try to catch that other one." And finally, there was one called Mon Monsters, which is it kind of had a little touchstone to Nightbreed, in my opinion. It's a Taiwanese film about it takes on bullying, but then also deals with the monsters. That's one that I don't know. I mean, I assume maybe it would come out on Shudder or something like that. Asian horror. It doesn't always get distribution here. It is a brutal film. Julie, I don't think you would like Mon Monsters at all. However, there's a lot to take in. It was kind of a divisive film at the fest, but I thought it was pretty effective, especially some of the bits. And then if you follow it all the way to the end, it doesn't pull any punches. Let's just say that. Those are my kind of scattered hits from the fest. We should post them. I can get the trailers and such. We should post those up sometime soon. All of them can be seen. If you go to fantasticfest.com, you can also look through these. But I will be covering these, and we're going to try to get some more Fantastic Fest recommendations as they come out and watch those. Hopefully we can do. I would love to do Gerald's Game and 1922 as like a new Stephen King bit, because they're good adaptations. So.
Excellent. Drew, what do you have for endorsements this week?
Well, a while back, I asked a question on my Facebook wall about runs on comic books that you had nostalgic or fond feelings for, even though they aren't necessarily well regarded. And the one that I brought up as an example is, I am a big fan of the Fantastic Four. I brought that up a few times on other episodes of this podcast. And so I've been reading Fantastic Four basically off and on pretty much my whole life. And when I was in junior high and high school, one of the big long runs, which is not well regarded at all, even though they were on the book forever, was Tom DeFalco and Paul Ryan. No, not that Paul Ryan. Comic book artist Paul Ryan. Comic book artist Paul Ryan. They were on Fantastic Four forever, just like basically a bulk of the 90s. And when I was in Austin Books a while back, I noticed that they have Marvel has a new thing called Epic Collections, which is basically the color version of their Essential line that they did a few years back, which is these phone book-sized collections of certain runs on comics. And strangely enough, they have an Epic collection of Tom DeFalco, Paul Ryan, Fantastic Four. So awesome. I picked that up. It was only $34, which for the amount of comics are getting, especially the fact that it's in color, is a pretty good deal. And I gotta say, I'm not saying it's masterful work or anything, but I got a hoot, out of reading these things again after years and years and years, because it's kind of a time capsule of like the last time the Marvel universe was really like the Marvel universe that is more or less as envisioned by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, where you have like story, like characters talking in the third person, and there's this weird level of like exuberance towards everything, and the characters just look like they're going to come bounding off the page at you, and there's no
I have to
worry
ask
about
you if that's if the DeFalco Ryan set of Fantastic Four can be collected in a phone book, hundreds and hundreds of pages, and you can read them and love them. I don't understand what about that is not masterwork. that's pretty amazing. I get what you're saying.
I think, when you think of the runs on Fantastic Four that are considered great, you think of like obviously Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and then John Byrne, and more recently, Mark Waid, and is thought of as like having a really good run on Fantastic Four. When you start talking about DeFalco Ryan, people remember that they're the ones that revealed that the Alicia Masters that married the Human Torch was a Skrull, and at one point they gave Sue Richards a very trashy looking costume, and that seems to be the only things that people really remember about that. And I think that's kind of unfortunate, because like Paul Ryan's artwork is actually really nice and clean, and has a great style, he's like a classic comic book artist. And I have to say, he does one of my favorite versions of the Thing. And he's sadly no longer with us, and it's a lot of fun. It's a fun run of comics, and like I said, it's got this exuberance to it that nowadays, there's been this since we got into the aughts and the 21st century, where when you read comic book dialogue, there's this real everybody's trying to strive towards naturalism, and this dialogue is not like that at all. It's very much in that like Stan Lee, very bold style of dialogue, and I kind of miss that. I wish this is kind of the last time that we saw anything like that without any shred of irony to that.
Right.
And I think that's kind of awesome.
Wow. I actually want to have a longer conversation sometime, because I totally agree with you, and I'm trying to figure out what would be if there's a good opportunity to create more sort of dialogue like that in a sort of unironic,
well, I mean, that's
Stan Lee and Roy Thomas style.
That's very much the dialogue that I think I've tried to bring more naturalism into my dialogue as I've gotten older, but I feel like that's the sort of rhythm of dialogue in my own head. It's like somewhere between like that Stan Lee, Roy Thomas dialogue, and then the way people talk in old talk in old movies. So.
Right. I'm with you, and I agree, and I think there's absolutely a place for that. Julia, what about you? Endorsements?
I'm thinking that given that there's been so much sad stuff and difficult stuff and stressful stuff, that I've been wanting to watch things that make me laugh lately, and so I want to endorse a couple of things that I'm finding hysterical. Will and Grace is back, after many years of being gone, and it's just as good as it was originally. It's hilarious. Highly recommend that. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is back. It's also really funny and strange show. And then a specific part of last night's Saturday Night Live was so funny. It's this bit that Kate McKinnon does, where she's a combination of Pennywise and Kellyanne Conway. I think she's Kelly Wise.
That was
it was so funny as Anderson Cooper, talking to Kelly Wise in the gutter. It's just so funny. So, I guess I'm advocating, I'm endorsing watching whatever makes you laugh, and these are the things that have made me laugh lately. Those and also The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon always makes me laugh. So, I'm trying to be of good cheer.
I
enjoy October. I love October. I love Halloween. I love the beautiful fall leaves and the cooler temperatures. It's all good.
I think she can pretty much do whatever you like if they ask her to do an impression of somebody, I've she is like crazy talented. Like her doing the Pennywise voice from the new It is like spot on. Like,
Oh,
and
yes.
usually her impressions aren't necessarily always good impressions, but she always does something really clever and interesting, regardless of whether the impression is good, you know? So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but on the
Very
same token, like, you know, Dana Carvey's Bush was, if you actually watch Bush Sr., it's not that. But everybody
Right.
thinks of Bush Sr. as the Dana Carvey.
That's right.
Yeah,
I
That's
gotta
right.
admit,
Yeah.
like,
exactly.
it's not the same. But
Right.
when you think about it, it is that, which is fantastic. I have to say, and I hope I'm not overstepping, but my escapism has actually been Shout Factory streams, like as they get a new Power Rangers show, like original Power Rangers Sentai shows.
Yeah.
And so their newest one is O Rangers, like OH. And I love that stuff because it's so bizarre. Has nothing to do with the weird Saved by the Bell crap that they added to Power Rangers when it came over here. It's, bad guys die horribly sometimes. There's just weird, crazy crap that just doesn't happen in kids shows. Maybe for better or worse. I'm not going to make a judgment call on that. But
Sure.
That's been my escapism when I just turn on a show. That, and I'll go back to Amazon's massive, massive amount of kung fu movies, which is I whoever's the buyer for them, you are the best ever. Rain doesn't like it because now there's hundreds of movies in our watch list that are kung fu movies, and there's new ones all the time. But my escapism, I agree with Julia. I've watched a lot more comedy, but in the kind of, I can't believe I'm watching this is crazy, is O Rangers, which you can, and if you have Roku, you can watch it on PC, Shout Factory TV, but you can also get the Shout Factory TV app. And they also have lots of Mystery Science Theater, which is cool.
Oh, no,
Now,
I love that they've been carrying that. Yeah, go ahead.
I will say that I'm doing this, to try to keep myself sane, but I'm always being an activist and doing my pro bono immigration work, and my immigration career is mostly pro bono anyway. So it's like a lot of volunteer, a lot of presentations and that kind of thing. So I am continuing to do my part to influence, because I do believe that we can't bury our heads in the sand and pretend everything is fine and not do anything.
Oh,
but I also think that we have to keep ourselves sane and do things that'll keep us healthy and able to do the work that needs to be done. So, what about you, Jason? What are you endorsing?
Actually, my endorsement this week is prose. I did some reading over the last few days of the short stories of Ray Russell and Robert Aikman. So Ray Russell, his short stories were collected into something called Haunted Castles with a Guillermo del Toro introduction. And the stories of Raymond Russell are all what I might call pseudo-Gothic. In other words, they were written in the 1960s, typically, but they all sound like Edgar Allan Poe. And some of them were made into movies. Sardonicus was made into a William Castle movie. He's a really beautiful writer. It's good stuff. And Robert Aikman is very much the same stuff, also of the 20th century, although a little bit earlier. And I just today learned that some of Robert Aikman's stories were made into a TV anthology back in the 80s. So I'd love to get my hands on it. But Robert Aikman's probably his most famous collection, at least in the United States, was called Cold Hand in Mine. That's available on Kindle. So yeah, this week I would say short story writers that are really wonderful and moody for Halloween. Robert Aikman and Raymond Russell are fabulous. So that brings us to the end of our look at Halloween 3. We will be back next week. I have to check. I'll be putting up a schedule of what we're going to be doing, and it's going to be cool. I know we're going to be doing Stranger Things soon. I just can't remember if it's next week or the week after. And thank you so much. It's so great to have you guys back
we were
on.
doing Haunters next week.
Haunters next week, and then Stranger Things the week after. That's it. Yes.
Another discovery from Fantastic Fest, no less.
Yeah. Haunters. So yes. So And also, we've had a request for some Carrie movies. We're going to be doing that soon. That might be right after a short break we take after Stranger Things. But we've got Carrie coming up, and then we got some more stuff coming up after that.
So
If you are listening, if you're enjoying the show, leave us reviews on iTunes, and also come to the Facebook page and tell us what you want to hear and what you think. We'd love to talk. So, thank you, everybody.
good night. This was great. It was great being back.
Oh, I'm so glad you're back. Bye, guys.